You might be sitting there thinking, a crisis? Not for me. But ask yourself this. What if you're unprepared and don't even know it yet? When something goes off the rails, be it a rogue pandemic, a sudden cyber attack, or global unrest, you'll find out just how fragile your normal really is. This isn't fear-mongering. This is reality. Governments spring into action the moment a crisis hits, and the things they ban or restrict first could leave you stranded. No warning, no buffer, and suddenly what you assumed was always there is gone. Here's what you'll learn in this video. 15 unexpected things governments almost always prohibit right when the crisis starts. Not just what's banned, but why it matters to you personally. Real-world examples and statistics that anchor each one in reality. And yes, I'll share at least one underrated but critical ban you're probably overlooking. So buckle up. I'm taking you through the bans that hit hard, fast, and personally, because what you don't know now can truly hurt you later. Item 1. Price gouging on essential goods. When the shelves start to thin out, human nature kicks in, sometimes in the ugliest way possible. People will grab what they can, mark it up 200, 300, even 800%, and resell it to the desperate. That's why governments move fast to ban price gouging on food, water, fuel, and medical supplies the moment a crisis is declared. During the first weeks of the pandemic, state attorneys general and federal agencies cracked down on gouging. One store even listed hand sanitizer at $60 a bottle. In Tennessee, two brothers who stockpiled about 18,000 bottles were ordered to stop sales and ultimately donated the lot. N95 masks were frequently offered at several times their normal price, e.g. around $6 each versus $1 pre-pandemic, and authorities pursued multiple price gouging cases. On paper, anti-gouging laws sound like they're protecting you. In practice, they create a double-edged sword. They stop the worst offenders, but they also make it illegal for small local suppliers to raise prices even slightly to cover their own skyrocketing costs. That's when inventory just disappears. Prepper tip: don't wait to be the person standing in an empty store hoping a shipment arrives. Keep a rotating supply of essentials, water, shelf-stable food, fuel, and basic medical items, so you never have to buy during the worst possible time. Dollar stores, discount chains, and off-brand suppliers are great places to build that buffer without breaking your budget. How much of your home right now could survive a sudden price freeze and weeks of no restock? If the answer is not much, that's your warning. Item 2. Sale of firearms and ammunition. When order starts to fray, governments know one thing for sure: panic plus firepower is a dangerous mix. That's why in the early hours of many crises, the sale of firearms and ammunition is one of the first things to be restricted or outright halted. We saw this play out during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, when New Orleans police and the National Guard carried out blanket confiscations of civilian firearms under a law enforcement-only order. It sparked immediate legal backlash and was blocked by court order. The logic is simple: reduce the chance of violence, looting, and armed confrontations while law enforcement is stretched thin. But here's the prepper's takeaway: if you don't already have what you need before a crisis, you won't get it after one starts. Even when bans or restrictions lift, ammunition shortages can drag on for months or even years. During the 2020 to 2022 U.S. ammo shortage, backlogs extended 2 to 2.5 years for popular calibers like 9mm and 5.56. Prices in some cases triple to quadruple, rising from about 33 cents to nearly $1 per round, and certain types remained completely out of stock for long stretches. Prepper tip: if you choose to keep firearms for defense, stock up on ammunition and maintain your gear now. Store ammo in a cool, dry, secure location. And don't neglect alternatives: pepper spray, sturdy batons, or non-lethal deterrents, since those can also vanish from shelves the moment restrictions hit. Ask yourself, if your local gun shop locked its doors tomorrow, would you be ready for the long wait? Item 3. Large public gatherings and events. When the government wants to keep chaos from multiplying, one of the fastest levers it can pull is banning large public gatherings. Concerts, sporting events, festivals, even religious services can be shut down overnight. In 2020, this became a global reality. During the first wave of the pandemic, gatherings were restricted to as few as 10 people in parts of the U.S., and countries like Italy and Spain imposed outright bans on public events. The reasoning? In a pandemic, crowds are perfect breeding grounds for disease. In civil unrest or disaster situations, they can quickly become flashpoints for violence or looting. But here's the part most people don't think about. These bans don't just kill your weekend plans, they also disrupt vital community functions, town hall meetings, neighborhood safety briefings, mutual aid gatherings. The very spaces where people could coordinate in a crisis get shuttered. Prepper tip: have a backup plan for communication and coordination that doesn't rely on public venues. A small, trusted network meeting in private homes over secure radio channels or via encrypted messaging can keep your group functional even if large gatherings are outlawed. And remember, these bans often stay in place long after the immediate threat has passed. In some regions during the pandemic, event restrictions lasted over a year. Could your support network survive that long without face-to-face meetups? Item 4. Non-essential travel and public transportation. When the goal is to control movement, whether to contain a virus, stop unrest from spreading, or secure a disaster zone, the government doesn't hesitate to slam the brakes on non-essential travel. We've seen this play out repeatedly. During the early pandemic lockdowns in 2020, countries from Italy to India imposed travel permits, military checkpoints, and even fines or jail time for anyone on the roads without authorization. In the U.S., certain states like Hawaii required proof of essential work or a quarantine plan just to enter. And it's not just roads. Public transportation is often cut back or shut down entirely. After the July 7th London bombings in 2005, large parts of the underground and bus network were suspended for safety and investigation. In hurricane zones, buses and trains are sometimes halted preemptively so they can be diverted for evacuation or emergency transport. The reasoning is straightforward: limit disease spread, reduce opportunities for unrest, and keep critical infrastructure available for government and emergency use. But for you, it means no quick trips for supplies, no commuting to distant family, and possibly being stranded if you're away from home when restrictions kick in. Prepper tip: always keep a last-mile plan, spare fuel, a reliable bicycle, or the ability to travel on foot with a loaded go bag. Store essentials where you actually live, not miles away in a storage unit you can't reach. And keep at least one alternate route mapped out on paper, because GPS apps may not work if cell service goes down. Ask yourself this: if all roads out of your town close tomorrow, could you get home and stay there for 2 weeks without outside help? Item 5. Fuel exports or hoarding. When a crisis disrupts supply chains, one of the first strategic moves governments make is clamping down on fuel exports and sometimes even banning the stockpiling of gasoline and diesel by civilians. The goal: keep domestic supplies flowing to emergency vehicles, hospitals, and critical infrastructure. We saw this in 2022 when several European countries facing severe energy supply disruptions imposed temporary export bans on fuel to safeguard domestic reserves. In the U.S., after Hurricane Sandy in 2012, fuel distribution was so strained that New Jersey implemented odd-even gasoline rationing and limited how much drivers could pump in one visit. Lines stretched for blocks and some stations ran dry for days. Hoarding bans are a quieter but equally serious measure. During Australia's 2019 to 2020 bushfire season, local governments and emergency services warned residents not to store large quantities of fuel at home due to shortages and extreme fire risk. Under existing hazardous storage laws, exceeding safe limits without proper licensing could result in fines. Here's the problem for regular people: if you wait until restrictions are announced, it's already too late. Stations will be swamped, supplies rationed, and prices, if not frozen, will spike. Prepper tip: maintain a small, safe reserve of fuel at home in approved containers, enough for at least 2 weeks of generator use or vehicle travel in an emergency. Rotate your stock every few months so it stays fresh. If possible, diversify: propane for cooking, kerosene for heaters, and rechargeable battery banks to offset fuel demand. Item 6. Use of drones or aerial devices. In a stable world, drones are toys, tools, and even lifelines for certain jobs. In a crisis, they can be a security threat, a privacy nightmare, or a tactical advantage in the wrong hands. That's why many governments restrict or ban drone use almost immediately when things go bad. After the 2017 Las Vegas mass shooting, the FAA quickly expanded a temporary no-drone zone over the entire area. During the 2022 European conflict, a government in Europe, not sure if I am allowed to mention the two countries, restricted civilian drone flights to prevent enemy forces from using them for targeting or intelligence gathering. Even during natural disasters like the 2018 California wildfires, authorities grounded hobbyist drones because they interfered with firefighting aircraft, forcing crews to halt water drops until the skies were clear. The reasoning is simple: in an emergency, controlling the airspace is as important as controlling the roads. Drones can be used for looting reconnaissance, tracking authorities, or even smuggling. Prepper tip: If you rely on drones for surveying property, scouting routes, or security, assume they'll be grounded by law in a crisis. Have an old-school alternative: binoculars, paper maps, a watchtower vantage point, or a network of spotters on foot. And if you own a drone, stay aware of local flight regulations before a disaster so you're not caught off guard by sudden temporary bans that last months. Here's the question: if you lost your aerial eyes tomorrow, would you still know what's happening just beyond your fence line? Item 7. Distribution of alcohol and tobacco. It's not the first thing most people think of, but in a major crisis, governments often move to restrict or ration alcohol and tobacco sales. The official reasoning? To reduce health risks, cut down on public disorder, and free up supply chains for essentials. During the 2020 lockdown, South Africa implemented one of the strictest bans in the world, halting all alcohol and cigarette sales for months. Authorities reported a drop in hospital trauma admissions linked to alcohol use, but black market activity surged. In parts of India, similar alcohol bans during lockdowns led to withdrawal-related hospitalizations when dependent individuals suddenly couldn't access supplies. For tobacco, it's often a question of logistics and public health. When shipping lanes or trucking capacity are strained, non-essential consumables are some of the first to be deprioritized. That means even without a formal ban, shortages hit quickly. Prepper tip: if you use these products, or live with someone who does, plan for the physical and psychological impacts of sudden withdrawal. Stock a safe personal supply if it's legal, or prepare healthier substitutes to ease the transition. This is especially important if you're storing other critical supplies. Someone going through withdrawal can't focus well on survival tasks. And here's the barter angle. In historical and modern collapses alike, from post-World War II Europe to Venezuela's economic crisis, alcohol and tobacco often became high-value trade items. Even if you don't use them, having a few small sealed units could be a barter lifeline. Now ask yourself, if stores closed tonight and stayed closed for 3 months, how would that impact morale? And what's your backup plan? Item 8. Certain communication or media content. When chaos hits, information becomes just as powerful and dangerous as food or fuel. That's why governments often move quickly to restrict certain media content or control communication channels. The stated reason? To stop the spread of misinformation, prevent panic, and protect national security. During the 2019 Easter bombings, Sri Lanka's government swiftly blocked Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and other social media platforms to stem the tide of misinformation. Similarly, in 2022, Russia passed sweeping laws criminalizing false information about the military, with penalties up to 15 years, leading many independent media outlets to suspend operations or shut down entirely. Even in democracies, emergency powers can effectively shut down broadcast media, even if unintentionally. After Hurricane Katrina, communications collapsed in New Orleans, leaving most radio channels usable only by emergency responders. And during the pandemic, dozens of governments enacted censorship or fake news laws, removed content deemed dangerous, and in some cases even detained media critics, while social platforms like Facebook also took down millions of posts flagged as misinformation. The catch? Misinformation is often defined by whoever holds power. That means legitimate local reports or alternative viewpoints can vanish along with actual falsehoods. Prepper tip: don't rely on a single channel for critical information. Keep a battery-powered or crank emergency radio tuned to multiple frequencies. Learn to use offline communication tools like printed maps, in-person relays, or mesh network devices that don't require cell towers. And if you follow online sources, back up vital info in advance. Once the plug is pulled, it's too late. If the internet went dark for a week tomorrow, how much would you actually know about what's happening beyond your street? Item 9. Trading of non-essential goods. When governments need to keep supply chains focused on survival, they often restrict the sale or trade of non-essential goods. The idea is to stop people from crowding stores for luxury or leisure items when space, manpower, and transport are urgently needed for essentials like food, medicine, and fuel. During the early pandemic, several U.S. states directed big-box retailers like Walmart and Target to stop selling non-essential items, such as clothing, electronics, and toys. In-store, shoppers had to order those online or via curbside pickup. In France, lockdown rules designated bookstores and non-essential goods as off-limits, while supermarkets could still sell similar items via non-floor channels. And during World War II, Britain's extensive rationing system caused many non-essential consumer goods to vanish from shelves entirely. Here's the impact for you. Even if you have cash in hand, you might not be legally allowed to buy certain items in person. That means hobby supplies, comfort items for kids, or tools you didn't think to stock could suddenly be out of reach. Prepper tip: identify the morale items your household values, craft supplies, reading material, basic entertainment, and keep a small reserve at home. These things may not keep you alive, but they keep you human, and morale is survival in a long grind. And if you barter, non-essentials and scarcity become powerful trade chips. Now ask yourself, if stores tomorrow sold nothing but canned beans and bleach, how much could you still keep your family's spirits up? Item 10. Price increases on utilities. In a major crisis, governments often freeze or strictly regulate utility prices, electricity, gas, and water, to protect households from sudden exploitation. On the surface, this seems like a win for consumers. But here's the catch. When prices are locked, suppliers sometimes can't cover operational costs, and that can lead to service disruptions or rolling blackouts. During the 2021 Texas winter storm, volatile wholesale prices, reaching up to $9,000 per megawatt hour, sent some consumers, especially those on variable rate plans, bills in the thousands of dollars over just a few days. The public and political backlash helped drive emergency reforms, including mandates to weatherize infrastructure and better protect consumers. In contrast, Argentina's long-term freezing of utility rates created a structural problem. Utilities were underfunded and unable to maintain or upgrade infrastructure, contributing to repeated energy system breakdowns. For preppers, this means two things. You might get short-term relief on bills, but you could also face sudden outages if the system can't sustain itself under fixed prices. And when restrictions lift, expect rates to jump to recover losses. Prepper tip: reduce dependency before a crisis. Solar panels with battery backup, rainwater collection systems, and high-efficiency appliances can keep you comfortable even if grid service falters. And in cold or heat extremes, have non-electric heating or cooling methods like wood stoves, thermal curtains, or evaporative coolers. If the lights went out for a week tomorrow, would your home still be livable without that utility lifeline? Item 11. Curfews and restrictions on nighttime movement. When authorities need to keep streets clear and reduce opportunities for crime, looting, or unrest, one of the fastest measures they take is imposing curfews. These often come with restrictions on nighttime movement, sometimes backed by heavy police or military presence. In Ferguson, Missouri, a midnight to 5 a.m. curfew was enforced during the 2014 unrest. During Sri Lanka's 2022 political crisis, authorities imposed an island-wide curfew under emergency powers. And in 2020, following George Floyd's death, dozens of U.S. cities implemented curfews from sunset to sunrise. For you, this means mobility is no longer guaranteed. A late-night run for supplies, checking on a neighbor, or even driving to a safer location could suddenly become illegal and dangerous if you ignore the order. Curfews often come with checkpoints, ID checks, and possible detention for violations. Prepper tip: plan for lock-in scenarios. Have enough food, water, lighting, and defensive tools to handle being sealed in your home for at least 72 hours straight. If you work night shifts or have essential duties, keep proof of your role on hand, printed, not just digital, since phones can fail. Ask yourself, if you couldn't leave your property from dusk till dawn for a week, what would you run out of first? Item 12. Export of medical supplies and equipment. When a crisis hits, especially a health-related one, governments scramble to keep critical medical gear inside their borders. That's why one of the first measures they take is banning or restricting the export of medical supplies and equipment. In early 2020, as the pandemic began spreading, roughly 85 countries worldwide imposed export restrictions on medical supplies, from masks and gloves to ventilators and medical consumables. The European Union responded by introducing an export authorization requirement for PPE shipments outside its borders, effective March 15, 2020. And in India, the government halted exports of 26 key pharmaceutical ingredients and formulations, including pain relievers and antibiotics, transactions that raised alarm given India's dominant role in the global generic drug market. The logic is clear: when hospitals are overwhelmed and supply chains are fragile, leaders want every available resource for their own citizens. But that means if you live in a country dependent on imports for key medical items, you could be cut off entirely. Prepper tip: build a personal reserve of medical basics, N95 masks, nitrile gloves, over-the-counter pain relievers, thermometers, and first aid gear, well before a crisis. Rotate your stock so it doesn't expire, and keep it sealed against moisture and pests. If someone in your household needs specialized medical equipment or medication, know its supply chain vulnerabilities, and have at least a few months' cushion if it's legal to store. Imagine finding out tomorrow that the only supplier for your essential medication is overseas and the government just closed the export channel. What's your fallback? Item 13. Use of private security or militia groups. In unstable times, the government's priority is to centralize control over force. That's why during crises, you'll often see restrictions or outright bans on the use of private security forces or militia groups. After Hurricane Katrina, private security contractors, many staffed by former military or law enforcement, flocked to the Gulf region to support recovery efforts, creating public conversations about their oversight and role. In parts of Latin America, heavily armed civilian groups tied to political factions have sometimes bolstered state security efforts. But in most cases, governments did not move to formally ban these groups during unrest. The reasoning is straightforward. Armed groups outside of official command structures can complicate response efforts, clash with law enforcement, or intimidate civilians. But for communities relying on local security arrangements, these bans can leave a sudden protection gap. Prepper tip: if you're part of a neighborhood watch or community patrol, know your legal limits before a crisis. Have alternative unarmed security measures in place, strong locks, motion lights, radio communication networks, so your group can still safeguard the area without breaking emergency laws. If the government told your local protection team to stand down tomorrow, how quickly could you adapt your security plan? Item 14. Certain financial transactions or withdrawals. When panic threatens the stability of banks or the broader economy, governments often impose limits on financial transactions and cash withdrawals. The aim is to stop bank runs, prevent capital flight, and stabilize the system while confidence is shaky. During the 2015 Greek debt crisis, the government closed banks for nearly 3 weeks and imposed a €60 per day ATM withdrawal cap while halting foreign transfers. In 2013, Cyprus introduced capital controls, including €300 daily withdrawal limits and bans on large transfers, to prevent banking collapse. Argentina, during recurring economic crises, repeatedly restricted foreign currency purchases and limited credit card use abroad. Earlier, its 2001 Corralito froze accounts and set withdrawal limits of just 250 pesos per week. For everyday people, this means you could wake up one morning and find your account access severely restricted. Even digital transactions might be throttled or monitored. In some cases, large purchases like vehicles, equipment, or even bulk supplies can require special approval. Prepper tip: maintain a modest reserve of cash in small bills at home, enough to cover at least 2 to 4 weeks of expenses. Keep some value in tangible goods, fuel, food, tools, that can be bartered if banking access tightens. And know where alternative, local exchange systems exist, like community trade networks or vetted peer-to-peer groups. If your bank card stopped working tomorrow, how many days could you operate without touching your account? Item 15. Gathering and sharing of certain personal data. In a crisis, especially one involving public health, national security, or civil unrest, governments often step in to control the gathering and sharing of personal data. This can mean limiting what private companies can collect, tightening privacy rules, or conversely, restricting the public from sharing certain information about individuals or sensitive locations. In South Korea's early pandemic response, officials used phone GPS, credit card records, and CCTV footage for contact tracing. But under legal authority like the Infectious Disease Control Act and data protection laws, public disclosures were anonymized and aimed to balance privacy. In contrast, in China, the pandemic enabled an expansion of AI surveillance, facial recognition cameras, health code systems, and strict control over online reporting to monitor citizens' movement and restrict sharing of identity or location data that conflicted with official narratives. The reasoning is twofold: limit the spread of misinformation or panic-inducing rumors, and safeguard sensitive personal information that could be exploited during instability. But these measures can also make it harder for communities to warn each other about risks or share independent updates. Prepper tip: have trusted offline ways to verify and share critical information with your network, like paper contact lists, agreed-upon meeting spots, and encrypted communication tools you've tested in advance. Avoid posting identifiable details about yourself or your group during a crisis, especially if doing so could violate emergency rules. If tomorrow you were told you couldn't share location updates or health information with anyone outside approved channels, would your network still know how to reach you or warn you? Drop a comment below with the first shortage, ban, or restriction you've seen happen in real life. Was it during a storm, a pandemic, or political unrest? What did it teach you about how fast normal can disappear? Your story might be the thing that pushes someone else to prepare, And if this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture, hit that like and subscribe button. It helps this information get to more people before it's too late. Check the video on the screen right now. I'm covering the most dangerous prepping myths you still believe, and how they could get you killed in a real disaster. See you there.